All right, so we are back in the book of Ecclesiastes, starting chapter 4. Now, I know I have a lot of new subscribers, and y'all may be shaking your head about what's going on here. This is a series that I've been doing on my channel, walking through the book of Ecclesiastes, trying to explain it to you guys. I realize that many of you are not Christians. Some of you may be questioning things in your life, and the purpose of this is just to show you the wisdom that is before you if you so desire to look into it. So, we're going into chapter 4 of Ecclesiastes, and before I begin, let me just say this. I think you can divide a lot of what we're going over right now from some of chapter 3 into the end of chapter 4 into maybe 6 sections. You know, you could call them, I like the way Steve Farrar does it, he calls it the 6 Enigmas of God. The first one is in chapter 3, verse 16 and 17. It talks about how the courts are unjust. And we went over that a lot last week. In verses 18 through 21 of chapter 3, everyone and everything is going to die. That's number 2. Number 3, you go into chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. So many people are oppressed. Number 4, in verses 4 through 6 in chapter 4, that work can be very vicious. And we're going to talk about that. The 5th enigma would be chapter 4, verses 7 through 12, is that loneliness is lousy. And then the last one, number 6, which is chapter 4, verses 13 through 16, is that life gets ugly when you lose a teachable heart. So let's start off where we left off last week, which was at the beginning of chapter 4, and was talking about oppression. Okay, so let me just read you a couple of verses. Then I looked again at all the acts of oppression which were being done under the sun, and behold, I saw the tears of the oppressed, and that they had no one to comfort them. And on the side of their oppressors was power, but they had no one to comfort them. If you guys, and we spoke about this last week, if you look at history, if you look at current news right now, the majority of the population of the world are under oppression. And as a Christian, or as somebody who has a good heart, there is nothing worse than watching bad people hurt good people. But Solomon says it's just a fact of life, and it's a confusing fact, you know, because last week we talked about the sovereignty of God and that he's in control of everything. Well, if he's in control of everything, why would he allow oppression? And continuing on, we go into verse 2. It says, "So I congratulated the dead who are already dead, more than the living who are living. But better off than both of them is the one who had never existed, who has never seen the evil activity that is done under the sun." Now this isn't Solomon saying to you, you should just end your life, okay? I don't want that to be the case. But what he's saying is that being alive, you just have to understand that it's just a matter of time. If it hasn't already happened to you currently, it's just a matter of time before somebody hurts you unjustly, and there's nothing that you can do about it, okay? It's just a part of getting older. And you know, I had a conversation in my stream here recently, a couple back, and I was speaking with a gentleman talking about, you know, a broken heart or being hurt by people. One of the reasons why I believe that God allows it is because it allows you later on in life, when you meet somebody who's hurting, or you know, you grow up and you have kids and they go through some struggles where somebody hurt them, because you were hurt previously, you are then able to relate to them on a more intimate level to walk through what they're going through. That's my personal perspective on it. All right, and let's continue on. Now we're going to go into verse 4, and I love this part. I really do. This really spoke to me while I was putting this all together. It says, "All I have seen, that every labor and every skill which is done is the result of rivalry between a man and his neighbor. This too is vanity and a striving after the wind." Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? It's talking about the rat race that we live in, you know, the keeping up with the Joneses, that the reason why the majority of the population of the world, why they get up every day and they go to work and they do what they do, is because they want what their neighbor has. Now, I'm going to pair this up with a verse. We're going to jump over to James chapter 4, okay? All right, so listen to this, okay? So we're in James chapter 4, verse 1. It says, "What is the source of quarrels and conflicts among you? talking about, relationships with people, but also on a larger scale here. Is not the source of your pleasures that wage war in your members? You lust and do not have, so you commit murder. You are envious and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. Now, what is he talking about here? We all work. I mean, the majority of the people who watch me, I think you're in your later teens all the way up to your early 40s. The fact is that everybody's got to get up and they got to go to work, okay? But many people strive for things that are unneeded. And when you go after things that you want with such a viciousness, you're going to be let down. All right. Keeping up with the Joneses is an impossibility because somebody always has more than you have and you can never attain where they're going. And if you live your life that way, you will be let down left and right, and you will live a meaningless, vain life. So be careful. But what does that mean? Does that mean we just don't work? I mean, let's continue on. Let's go into verse 5 and 6. It says, "The fool folds his hands and consumes his own flesh. One handful of rest is better than 2 fistfuls of labor, striving after the wind." Now, what does this mean? Okay, I mean, you gotta work, guys. You can't not work. I mean, you have to have money to go buy the normal clothes and live in the normal house and eat the normal food and do the normal things that normal people do. Okay, but we don't go out and kill ourselves. It's basically breaking it down into 3 categories. The first category is the industrious man, the 2 fistful of work. Let's say each fistful is like 40 hours, all right? So this guy's gonna work 80 hours a week because his entire life, his entire pursuit in life is about gaining things. Then we have the second guy. He refuses to work. He sits idle. You can't do that one either, all right? That guy's a sluggard. We don't like sluggards. What we need is what's called an integrated man, a balanced man. 1 fistful of labor and 1 fistful of Rocky Road ice cream, as Tommy would say. You got to have balance in your life. Do not lose focus. You got to work because you're a man, and there's nothing worse than a man who doesn't provide for his family. Okay? So you got to work. But you also have to enjoy the goodness of God. Remember, I spoke about this. You need to enjoy that food that you eat and that drink that you drink, the time that you have with your wife and with your kids. Going to a ball game and watching a movie and playing a video game. You got to enjoy those little things in life because if you don't, you are missing the boat. All right? Let's continue on. Now, this part is really interesting. You could call this guy the Ebenezer Scrooge of the Bible. And this is verses 7 through 8 of Ecclesiastes 4. It says, "Then I looked again at vanity under the sun. There was a certain man without a dependent, having neither a son nor a brother, yet there was no end to all of his labor. Indeed, his eyes were not satisfied with riches, and he never asked, and for whom am I laboring and depriving myself of pleasure? This too is vanity, and it is a grievous task." All right, so what do we do with this? It's a very interesting thing, and I'm sure you guys have met people like this in your life, and there's a high chance that some of you guys may be like this. You have a guy who works and works and works and gathers and gathers and gathers and hoards his riches, and he has nobody in his life. He has no relationships, because remember, life is about relationships, but we have many people who think that life is about the pursuit of things. So they work and work and work and work and work and work and work, and they gather and they become exceedingly wealthy, but they have nobody to share it with because they stuck their head in the ground and they just went for it. I work in the insurance industry, and there are many, many people in my industry who are filthy rich. I worked for this company for a long time, maybe about 6 years. I worked at the corporate level, and I was teaching people how to sell insurance and how to recruit and build agencies. And I was about to take a step forward in the business, which would have required me to travel 4 to 5 days a week. I would be away from my home 4 to 5 days a week, and not just a little bit. I mean, that is a lot of time. And the idea behind it, why they did this, was because they knew if they could get the man away from his family, he would focus 100% on his job. So they wanted Monday morning, you fly out and you don't fly back in until Friday evening, because they wanted the sole focus of this man to be on the job. Well, the executive side of that business, 85% of the men were divorced. Most of them had affairs on their wives. Their kids had fallen away. because they did not have male leadership at home. Now, I'm not saying if you guys travel for a living, because I know many men do, a lot of my friends do. What I'm speaking about, I'm not saying that that's bad, okay? What I'm saying is that there has to be balance, and you have to know when to say when, okay? There is a certain time in your life where you can travel and a certain time when you can't, and it's okay to do it as long as it doesn't overcome the most important job in your life, and that's being a husband to your wife and a father to your children. If your job gets in the way of that, it is no longer a job, it is evil, and you've got to walk away from it. That balance is what is needed in your life, and you can get so blinded. And I know you guys, especially you young kids, I get messages from you guys all the time talking about how you want to be an entrepreneur, or you want to live in this type of house, and you want to make this type of money, and you want to drive this type of car. I'm telling you right now, there's no fulfillment in any of that stuff. You cannot sacrifice relationships with people for things. It will never fulfill you. A car, even if it's an $80,000 car, once you finally own it, within 2 or 3 months, you won't care anymore because it'll just be a car. You're striving because you want to have a $300,000 or $400,000 home over your $200,000 home. Well, once you're inside that $400,000 home within 3 to 6 months, it's just a home, you guys. Do not sacrifice relationships for things, because eventually the things are pointless and they just become garbage. You know, women strive to buy these fancy clothes. Well, 5 years later, they won't even fit in them and they won't be in style. Or you want to buy this red convertible that you can drive down the street and pick up chicks. Well, by the time you're 55, nobody's going to be looking at you in that car. You're going to look like an idiot driving around in it. So be careful. Life is about friendships. And I would say, you know, talking about this Ebenezer Scrooge type character who just works and works and works, and he gathers and he gathers and he gathers. It's a man. It's got to be a man, because men have this natural inclination to isolate. And I've spoken about it so many times because I see it left and right. These good men, and, you know, left on their own. You know, all men want to be the ruler of their domain. Okay, they don't want to be told by anybody what to do. But God consistently throughout the Bible talks about relationships. You know, there's a great verse: as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. You have got to get around a guy, and you've got to talk. And I think there's a lot of reasons for it, because guys can hold guys accountable, of course, but also just to know that you're not crazy, that you're not losing it, that these men around you are going through the same things that you're going through in your life. And if you isolate, you become strange because you don't realize that you're normal. Okay? All right, let's continue on, and we go into verses 9 through 12. And these verses mean a lot to me because these were actually the verses that my wife and I had read at our wedding. Gosh, 16 years ago. Well, some of my favorite verses in the whole Bible right here. Sometimes misinterpreted, okay? Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there is not another to lift him up. Furthermore, if two lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And if one can overpower him who is alone, two can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly torn apart. Now, what is this talking about? It's talking about the strength of relationship. You know, people want to isolate, which I just spoke about. And what God is talking about here is that 2 are better than 1. A team, a buddy, having somebody walking through life with you. And what's better than 2? 3. Because a cord of 3 strands is not quickly torn apart. 2 people are more productive. If it gets cold, they can keep each other warm. They can protect each other when danger comes. And, you know, especially in a marriage, you see this a lot. I mean, I can't tell you, in over 15 years of marriage with my wife, it goes without saying that when she started struggling in business, my business took off. And when I started struggling in business, her business took off. When she's not feeling good, I'm feeling great. When I'm feeling great, she's feeling bad. You follow me? It's this balance that comes. You know, being there and relying on each other as a team. Well, everybody needs that. Now, as a man, you've got to have men in your life. Your wife is not a substitute for male companionship, okay? Don't ever forget that. I love the way Tommy, he really broke it down, okay? He says, what's the use of accumulating all this money if you don't have friends? If it's one thing that I can encourage you guys to get out of this entire study that I'm doing in Ecclesiastes, is that you guys have to find joy in life. And joy comes in just the little things, you know, a really good meal, a good drink, a good movie, a good laugh. spending time with a buddy, or getting together with your family. It's those little things when you just feel good. Because eventually life's going to smack you across the face. And I talk about that pretty regularly because I've seen it happen so many times. People get cancer and kids die in accidents and tragedies and war. And these things are starting to hit closer to home now too. So if you don't have relationships in your life, you got to get out there and you've got to make some. You got to be a loving, giving, kind, servant-hearted friend. Life gets really, really cold when you're by yourself, okay? So you got to have some buddies, some pals to put your arms around, all right? Because when it's all said and done, the only thing you'll have with you at your funeral will be your friends and your family. The people who made money by you and you made money for, they're not going to be there because they don't care about you. Your friends and your family, they're the ones that are going to be crying, okay? All right, the next thing that he's going to go over, and this is in verses 13 through 16, is popularity. I love this part. A poor yet wise lad is better than an old and foolish king who no longer knows how to receive instruction, for he has come out of prison to become king, even though he was born poor in his kingdom. I have seen all the living under the sun throng to the side of the second lad who replaces him. There is no end to all the people, to all who were before them, and even the ones who will come later will not be happy with him, for this too is vanity and a striving after the wind. Now, I read that really quick. It's kind of hard to comprehend, but let me break it down. Here's how it goes. Many people, including you, at one time or currently are seeking fame and popularity, especially on YouTube. People want to be known. They start from scratch. They want to be famous. They want it bad. Okay, now very few people will actually do it, but here's the warning, okay, that there is no end to the people who will not be happy with you the more famous you get. Now I'm going to use this in terms of perspective. Let's look at YouTube. Let's look at Drifter, Chaos X Silencer, Ali A. I don't know, you can pick some other ones. Let's look at them. They're some of the biggest ones. T. Martin. Now they all started off just like I did. Small channel. People liked them. They were doing something different. Yeah, they were original. As they grew and grew and grew, they became more established and people started to look at them differently. They're still doing the same content that they were doing when they first started, but now that they're big, they're judged more. We call the people who do this trolls. Now currently on my channel, I've got about 2,200 subscribers. I probably have somewhere between 5 to 10 trolls. Now if you do that ratio and you work up to 1 million subscribers, we're talking about 2,500 to 3,000 trolls. And these people like to talk. They won't go away. They're just always coming at you. So popularity is not a great thing, or famous. You know, there's a verse in 1 Timothy chapter 2 verse 2, yeah. And Paul's talking about there's nothing better for a man than to live a tranquil, quiet life. It's okay not to be known, okay? You just want to wake up, you want to do your thing, you want to go to work, do your job, make your money, eat your meal, spend time with your wife and your kids, hang out with your family and your friends, and then you want to die. You don't need to create big waves because big waves bring a lot of problems with them. People hounding you, taking pictures of you, judging you at every turn, hurting your kids. You're a target. You don't want to walk around with a target on your back, and that's what Solomon's talking about here. So all you people who are rushing after fame and popularity, understand that there's a big downside to doing it. The more famous you get, the more people will hate you. All right? It's pretty interesting, right? I mean, you understand that Ecclesiastes was written almost 3,000 years ago, and it still applies to YouTube. I love it. I love it. So, to boil it all down, Solomon says this: you trust God, you do good, and you let the chips fall where they may and enjoy life. Find some buddies, make all the money you can in a hard day's work, and go home and sit loose. Just have a good old time, you guys. So there it is. That is the completion of chapter 4. So what does it all come down to again? You can get trapped in life. There's a lot of confusing things that go on out there. All right, there's oppression and rivalry. People are pursuing popularity. There's injustice being done, and it's all going to happen, but you just got to take it with a grain of salt, and you got to power through and enjoy the goodness of God. All right. As always, you guys, if y'all have comments, leave them down below. I'll do my best in answering them. And Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time in your word. I pray, Heavenly Father, that each and every person listening to this may be blessed by it, that they may find you as their security in life. May you forgive us all for our sins in your heavenly and holy name, Jesus Christ. Amen.